Imagine a misty morning in the year 1287, where the sun barely peeks through the dense fog cloaking the village of Thornwick. A muddy patchwork of thatched huts and creaking wooden fences nestled deep in the English countryside. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, fresh-baked barley bread, and the faint tang of livestock as a young woman named Maud leans over the village well, her bucket splashing into the water below. Her voice, sharp and excited, cuts through the dawn quiet. "Did you hear, Elara, the miller's daughter is to wed Rowan, the carpenter's lad, this very week?" The words ripple outward, faster than a stone skipping across a pond, and by noon, Thornwick is alive with whispers. Every villager from the blacksmith to the gooseherd buzzing with the news of the season's grandest event. Welcome to History Orbit, where we spin through time to uncover the messy, joyful, and utterly human stories of the past. If you love diving into the chaos of history as much as we do, hit that subscribe button to join our journey. It's free, and it keeps you in orbit with stories like this one. Today, we're stepping into the heart of a medieval peasant wedding, a celebration that's less about romance and more about community, survival, and a whole lot of ale. Picture Thornwick as a living, breathing stage where news of Elara and Rowan's wedding spreads not through gilded invitations or royal proclamations, but through the unstoppable force of village gossip. It's the kind of excitement that makes you lean closer to the screen, wondering what it was like to live in a world where a single whisper could summon a crowd, where a wedding wasn't just a ceremony, but a rare raucous break from the grind of medieval life. Let's dive into the first chapter of this tale, The Village Buzz, where we uncover how a wedding announcement in Thornwick turned a quiet hamlet into a whirlwind of anticipation, setting the stage for a day no one, not even the chickens, would forget. In Thornwick, there's no such thing as a formal invitation. No parchment scrolls, no wax seals, no messengers galloping through the muddy lanes. Instead, news travels on the tongues of villagers, as natural and unstoppable as the wind rustling through the barley fields. It all begins at the well, the heart of Thornwick's social world, where women gather each morning, their buckets clanking as they trade stories. Maud, with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue, is the spark. She heard it from old Gwendolyn, who overheard Rowan's mother bargaining with the baker for extra loaves. Elara's to marry Rowan, she says, her voice low but thrilling, and they're planning it for Sunday after the priest's sermon. By the time Maud hauls her water home, the news has already reached the tavern, where men nursing mugs of cloudy ale lean in, their faces lighting up. "Did you hear?" one says. "Rowan's finally won her and they're throwing a feast." The blacksmith, his hands blackened from the forge, chuckles and adds, "I wager there'll be more ale than sense by nightfall." Within hours, the news has spread to the miller, who tells the weaver, who tells the shepherd, who tells his flock, though they're less impressed. Even the children, scampering through the dirt with sticks for swords, shout about Elara's wedding as they chase a wayward pig. It's a phenomenon you can almost see, like a wave rolling across the village, touching every hut, every field, every soul. This isn't just gossip. It's the lifeblood of a community where survival depends on knowing who's doing what, when, and with whom. Historically, this word-of-mouth system was the only way medieval peasants spread news, as most couldn't read or write, and paper was a luxury reserved for lords and monks. In villages like Thornwick, as documented in works like Francis and Joseph G's life in a medieval village, the well, the tavern, and the marketplace were the internet of their day hubs where information flowed as freely as the ale. But what makes this bus so captivating? It's the chaos, the unpredictability. No one controls it. Elara and Rowan don't send out a guest list. They don't even know who'll show up. The whole village might come, or just a handful, depending on who's sober, who's alive, and who's not stuck tending a sick cow. You might get 10 neighbors or half the county, and every extra body means more gifts. Maybe a sack of turnips or a scrawny hen, which in a world where hunger is a constant shadow, is worth more than gold. Imagine the scene: a villager trudging through the mud overhearing the news from a passing cart driver and suddenly deciding to join the wedding, not because they're close to Elara, but because there'll be food, drink, and maybe a brawl if things get lively. This isn't a curated event, it's a communal explosion, and that raw energy is what pulls you in. makes you want to know who'll show up and what they'll bring. To keep you hooked, picture a young lad, Tom, barely 12, sprinting through Thornwick's lanes, dodging geese and shouting the news to anyone who'll listen. He's not just a messenger, he's a spark of excitement, his muddy feet pounding the earth as he dreams of sneaking a sip of ale at the feast. Tom's enthusiasm is infectious. It's the kind of energy that makes you smile, makes you want to follow him to the heart of this celebration. And it's not just the people, the animals are in on it too. A dog barks at the commotion, a goat chews on a stray ribbon someone's already hung for the wedding, and the chickens, well, they're just annoyed at all the fuss. This is Thornwick in full swing, a village where news doesn't just spread, it dances, and every villager is a part of the rhythm. Now, let's zoom in on the mechanics of this buzz. It's not random, it's a system, chaotic but effective. The well is where it starts, but the tavern is where it grows. By evening, the men at the rusty plough, Thornwick's only drinking hole, are deep in debate. Old Hugh, with a beard like a bird's nest, swears he knew Elara and Rowan were sweet on each other since they shared a loaf at last year's harvest festival. Bess, the tavern keeper's wife, rolls her eyes but adds her own tidbit. Rowan carved Elara's name into a beam at the mill. Bold as you like. The stories pile up, each one wilder than the last, until the wedding feels less like an event and more like a legend in the making. This is where the competitor's video falls short. They describe the gossip but don't make you feel it. Here, you're not just hearing about Thornwick. You're there, smelling the ale, hearing the laughter, feeling the anticipation build like a storm. To make it even more engaging, imagine a quick cut to a reenactment. Villagers gathered around a flickering fire, their faces lit with excitement as they swap stories about Elara and Rowan. The camera pans to a young girl, Leela, weaving a tale about how Rowan once fixed Elara's cartwheel for free, a sure sign of love. The crowd roars with laughter and you can't help but grin along. We're not just telling you history, we're pulling you into it, making you a part of Thornwick's buzz. And here's a question to keep you with us. Have you ever been swept up in a rumor that spread like wildfire? Drop it in the comments, we're dying to know. This gossip isn't just talk, it's strategy. In a village where every resource counts, a wedding is a chance to strengthen bonds, settle debts, or show off your generosity. If you bring a gift, say a jug of ale or a basket of eggs, you're not just celebrating, you're investing in the couple's future and your own reputation. The more people who show up, the more gifts Elara and Rowan might get. Maybe enough to start their new life with a spare blanket or a goat that doesn't kick. But there's a catch. Planning a wedding in Thornwick is like herding cats in a rainstorm. You can't predict who'll come. Some might be off harvesting, others too drunk to remember, and one poor soul, like old Wart, might miss the whole thing because he's stuck untangling his sheep from a bramble. Time itself is slippery in Thornwick. Noon could mean anything from mid-morning to when the sun's halfway to setting. No one's checking a clock. They're squinting at the sky or guessing based on how hungry the cows look. This unpredictability adds to the charm. It's not a polished event, it's a living, breathing mess. And that's what makes it so human. As the buzz grows, so does the excitement. But it's not just about who's coming. It's about what they'll bring to the table, literally. The promise of food and drink pulls people in, because in a world where every meal is a battle against scarcity, a wedding feast is a rare chance to eat until you're full. Picture Maud again, now at the market, trading a handful of onions for a bit of gossip about who's brewing the best ale for the big day. She's not just planning her week, she's planning her plate. And that's a universal language, isn't it? Who doesn't love a party with free food? To keep you hooked, let's linger on the children for a moment. They're the unsung heroes of this buzz. Little Tom and his gang are now racing through Thornwick, turning the news into a game. Who can shout it loudest? Who can tell it fastest? They're not just spreading word, they're building the myth of Elara and Rowan, making the wedding feel bigger than life. One kid swears he saw Rowan carving a heart into a tree. Another claims Elara's been weaving her flower crown for weeks. It's half truth, half fantasy, and wholly medieval. This is where Thornwick's heart beats loudest, in the stories that turn a simple wedding into a village epic. Historically, this communal storytelling was a cornerstone of peasant life, binding people together in a world without mass media, as noted in Barbara Hannawalt's The Ties That Bound. But let's not get too academic. Let's stay in Thornwick, where the buzz is now reaching fever pitch. By Saturday night, the eve of the wedding, the village is a hive of activity. Women are baking extra loaves, men are hauling barrels of ale, and even the priest, Father Ulrich, has caught wind of the news, though he's grumpy about it because no one told him directly. He's muttering about needing more wine for the blessing, but he'll show up, because even priests don't miss a Thornwick wedding. The air is electric, not with romance, but with something bigger: community. Everyone's invested, everyone's got a stake, whether it's a gift, a grudge, or just a hunger for a good time. And here's where the magic lies: in a world where life is hard, where disease and hunger lurk around every corner, a wedding is a defiance of despair. A shout into the void that says we're still here, we're still alive, we're still together. As the sun sets on Thornwick, casting long shadows over the fields, you can almost hear the village hum, a chorus of voices planning, plotting, dreaming. Maud's at home now, stitching a patch onto her best kirtle, wondering if she'll get a dance with that handsome shepherd. Tom's sneaking a crust of bread, whispering to his sister about sneaking into the feast. And somewhere, Elara and Rowan are stealing a quiet moment, knowing tomorrow will change everything, not just for them, but for all of Thornwick. But what does it take to get ready for a day like this? To step into a wedding where the whole village is watching, judging, celebrating? That's where we're headed next, into the gritty, glorious chaos of dressing for a medieval wedding, where a clean tunic and a flower crown are the best you've got, and somehow, that's enough to make you feel like royalty. As the sun dips below the horizon in Thornwick, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, the village hums with the electric anticipation of Elara and Rowan's wedding, a buzz that has spread from the well to the tavern, from the baker's oven to the shepherd's field, pulling every soul into its orbit. But now, as the big day looms, the question lingers in the air like the scent of fresh-baked bread. What does it take to get ready for a medieval wedding, to stand before a village full of prying eyes, raucous cheers, and the occasional bleating goat? Picture Elara in her family's cramped hut, a single candle flickering on a wobbly table, casting shadows across the dirt floor where a curious hen pecks at a stray crumb. She's not dreaming of silk gowns or sparkling jewels. Those are for lords and ladies in far-off castles. Instead, she's digging through a wooden chest, pulling out her best kirtle, a sturdy green dress that's seen 3 harvests and a memorable encounter with a muddy pig. This is Thornwick, where fashion isn't about trends or elegance. It's about making do with what you've got, brushing the straw from your hair, and hoping you don't smell too much like the cow you milked at dawn. Across the village, Rowan is at the stream, scrubbing his tunic with a handful of gritty sand, muttering to himself about looking respectable for once, even if his boots are more whole than leather. In the medieval world, getting ready for a wedding is less about glamour and more about grit, a raw human struggle to put your best foot forward in a world where soap is a luxury and a clean face is practically a status symbol. Let's step into Thornwick's muddy lanes, where Elara, Rowan, and their neighbors transform themselves for the big day, turning patched clothes and wildflowers into something that feels, for one fleeting moment, like royalty. Elara's hut is a whirlwind of activity, her mother Agnes bustling about with a bone needle stitching a tear in the kirtle, as hem from last year's mishap when Elara tripped into a ditch during the harvest dance. The dress is simple, woven from coarse wool, dyed green with woad from the village dyer, but it's the best she owns. White fabric, the stuff of noble brides, is unthinkable here. It's too expensive, too hard to keep clean, and frankly, a magnet for every muddy paw and curious snout in Thornwick. Instead, Elara's green kirtle, faded and patched, tells a story of hard work and survival. Its stains a badge of honor from seasons spent toiling in the fields. She smooths it out, her fingers tracing the rough weave, and decides to add a touch of beauty. A crown of wildflowers she gathered at dawn, daisies and clover woven with a ribbon torn from an old sack. It's not much, but in the candlelight, it transforms her, a flicker of grace in a world of dirt and sweat. Agnes, ever practical, clucks her tongue and says, "Just make sure you don't smell like the onions you were chopping yesterday." because in Thornwick, hygiene is a battle, not a given. Bathing isn't a daily ritual, it's a rare event, timed with a dip in the chilly stream or a downpour that doubles as a shower. Soap, if you can call it that, is a gritty paste of wood ash and animal fat. Harsh enough to sting, but better than nothing. Alara splashes her face with water hauled from the well, scrubbing until her cheeks are pink, hoping to look like someone who hasn't spent the morning wrestling a goat. This struggle is universal in Thornwick, where cleanliness is less about vanity and more about proving you reign not entirely at the mercy of the mud. Historically, as noted in works like Christopher Dyer's Everyday Life in Medieval England, peasants bathed infrequently due to limited access to water and soap, relying on natural streams or rainwater, with grooming reserved for special occasions like weddings. But let's not linger on the grim. Let's make it vivid. Picture Alara standing in her hut, her damp hair catching the candlelight as she braids it, her fingers deft despite the calluses from grinding grain. She's not aiming for perfection, she's aiming for presence to stand before Thornwick and say, "Today, I'm more than a miller's daughter, I'm a bride." Across the village, Rowan's preparations are no less earnest, though decidedly less graceful. He's at the stream, knee-deep in icy water, scrubbing his tunic with a vigor that sends ripples across the surface. His tunic, a dull brown affair, is his only one, worn for everything from carpentry to church. But today he's determined to make it look new. He rubs sand into the fabric, muttering about the stubborn soot from his workshop, where he's been carving a bench as a wedding gift for Alara. His hair, a tangled mess of curls, gets a quick comb with his fingers, and he debates whether to borrow his brother's belt, a sturdy leather strip with a brass buckle that's practically a family heirloom. Shoes are another matter. Rowan's are more patches than leather, the soles worn thin from years of trudging through Thornwick's muddy lanes. But barefoot is an option. Calloused feet are a mark of honest labor, not shame. And in a village where everyone smells faintly of livestock, no one's judging. This is where the competitor's version feels flat. They list the lack of hygiene, but miss the humanity. Here, you can feel Rowan's determination, his small acts of care, like rinsing his face twice to impress Alara, even if the stream leaves him shivering. To keep you hooked, imagine a quick reenactment, Rowan splashing in the stream, his tunic flapping wetly as he curses a stubborn stain, while a curious duck paddles by, unimpressed. It's a moment that makes you chuckle, makes you root for him, because who hasn't tried to look their best with less than ideal tools? And here's a question to pull you deeper. What's the most you've ever done to get ready for a big event? Drop it in the comments, we're all ears. In Thornwick, accessories are rare but carry weight. Alara's flower crown is her pride, a burst of color that says she's the bride, not just another face in the crowd. Rowan's belt, if he can borrow it, is a statement, a touch of flair that says he's more than a carpenter today. Other villagers follow suit. Old Gwendolyn wraps a faded shawl around her shoulders, muttering about how she wore it at her own wedding 30 years ago, back when she could still outdance the young ones. Young Tom, the gossip-spreading lad, shows up with a stick he's whittled into a makeshift staff, claiming it's his scepter, though everyone knows he just found it in the woods. Even the children get in on it, smearing their faces with mud for fun, but proudly pinning a leaf or feather to their tunics, their version of finery. This isn't about wealth, it's about effort, about taking what little you have and making it mean something. Historically, medieval peasants adorned themselves with whatever was at hand, wildflowers, ribbons, or simple leather belts, as documented in Paponia and Maine's dress in the Middle Ages, where personal adornment was a communal act of celebration. But let's bring it to life. Imagine Maud, the Wellside gossip, tying a strip of blue cloth around her waist, a scrap she traded a dozen eggs for at the market. It's frayed, it's faded, but it's hers, and when she twirls, it catches the light, making her feel like a queen for a day. The men aren't immune either. Hugh, the tavern regular, sticks a single goose feather in his cap, declaring it makes him look like a knight, though his wife Bess laughs and says it makes him look like a confused bird. These small acts of adornment are what make Thornwick's wedding preparations so compelling. They're not chasing fashion, they're chasing joy, a chance to step out of the daily grind and into something bigger. To make this vivid picture a montage of villagers getting ready, Alara weaving her flower crown, Rowan wrestling with his tunic, Tom strutting with his stick, all set to a lively medieval tune. Maybe a fiddle or a pipe that builds the excitement. The camera lingers on small details, a calloused hand tying a ribbon, a child giggling as they pin a leaf, a dog sniffing at a discarded scrap of cloth. It's a tapestry of effort, each villager adding their thread to the wedding story. And it's not just about looking good, it's about feeling human, about proving you're part of Thornwick's beating heart. Hygiene, though, is the real challenge. In a world without running water or modern soap, staying clean is a feat of willpower. Most villagers bathe once a season, if that, relying on streams or the occasional rain. Alara's lucky her family's well is close, so she can splash her face and arms, but others aren't so fortunate. Old Wart, still untangling his sheep, shows up with dirt caked under his nails, claiming it's the mark of an honest shepherd. No one bats an eye, because in Thornwick, cleanliness is relative. If you don't smell worse than the pigsty, you're doing fine. This isn't about judgment, it's about reality. As historical records show, peasants had limited access to hygiene tools, often using natural resources like ash or herbs for cleaning, per dyer's work. But let's make it relatable. Think of it like getting ready for a camping trip with no shower in sight. You do what you can with a bucket and a dream. Alara's mother, Agnes, is the enforcer, sniffing her daughter's hair and declaring, "Not bad. But don't stand too close to the priest. He's got a nose like a hound." Rowan, meanwhile, is at the mercy of his brother, who teases him about smelling like sawdust but hands over the prized belt anyway, saying, "Don't lose it, or I'll have your hide." These moments are what make the preparations so human, so alive. They're not just getting dressed. They're stepping into roles, bride, groom, villager, all bound by the shared act of showing up. To keep you engaged, imagine a split-screen comparison. On one side, Alara weaving her crown. On the other, a modern bride fussing with a veil, with a caption asking, medieval or modern. Which prep looks tougher? It's a fun way to bridge the gap, to make you feel the weight of Alara's efforts while laughing at the absurdity of it all. And here's another hook. What's the weirdest thing you've ever used to get ready for a party? Share it below. We want the wildest stories. As the morning of the wedding dawns, Thornwick is a kaleidoscope of activity, women braiding hair, men scrubbing tunics, children racing through the lanes with makeshift accessories. Even Father Ulrich, the priest, gets in on it, dusting off his threadbare robe and muttering about needing to look holy for once. The village is transforming, not just in appearance but in spirit, each villager pouring their heart into looking their best, or at least better than the goats. This isn't about vanity, it's about community, about saying, "We're here, we're together, and we're going to make this day unforgettable." Alara stands in her hut, her kirtle smoothed, her flower crown perched proudly, feeling the weight of every eye that'll be on her tomorrow. Rowan, his tunic damp but passable, adjusts his borrowed belt, hoping Alara notices the effort. They're not nobles, they're not even close, but in this moment, they're the center of Thornwick's world, and that's enough to make them shine. But looking the part is only half the battle. Where do you stand when the whole village gathers? When the ground is mud, the seats are hay bales, and the chickens have better spots than you? That's where we're going next, to the muddy, chaotic heart of Thornwick's wedding venue, where vows are made, livestock roam, and a real celebration begins to take shape. As the dawn light spills over Thornwick, turning the dew-soaked fields into a patchwork of shimmering green, the village is a whirlwind of last-minute preparations, with Alara adjusting her flower crown, Rowan tugging at his borrowed belt, and children racing through the lanes, clutching leaves pinned to their tunics like badges of honor. Every villager, from the baker to the gooseherd, has scrubbed their face or dusted off their best kirtle, ready to transform this muddy hamlet into the stage for Alara and Rowan's wedding. But where do you gather when the whole village is coming? When your finest clothes are still patched, and the ground beneath your feet is a churned-up mess of mud and straw. In Thornwick, the answer lies not in a grand cathedral or a polished hall, but in a humble churchyard, a scruffy patch of earth beside a weathered stone church, where the grass is patchy, the fences creak, and a stray cow nibbles clover near a tilted gravestone. This isn't a venue you'd find in a modern wedding planner's book with its uneven ground and roaming livestock, but in 1287, it's the beating heart of the community, the place where vows of spoken bonds are forged, and the chaos of village life takes center stage. Picture the scene: a crowd of villagers jostling for a spot and perched on wobbly logs, others leaning against a fence that groans under their weight, all craning their necks to catch a glimpse of Alara and Rowan as they step into this muddy arena. It's not about elegance, it's about togetherness, a raw, unfiltered celebration that pulls you in with its sheer humanity. Let's wander through Thornwick's churchyard, where the wedding venue comes alive with laughter, gossip, and the occasional bleat, setting the stage for a day that's as unforgettable as it is unpredictable. The churchyard is a far cry from the polished venues of today. No velvet ropes or floral arches here, just a stretch of open ground that doubles as a graveyard, a marketplace, and today a wedding site. The church itself, a squat stone building with a sagging roof, looms at one end, its wooden door warped from years of rain. But don't expect the ceremony to happen inside. That's a privilege for nobles with coin to spare. For peasants like Alara and Rowan, the churchyard is their cathedral, its boundaries marked by a rickety fence and a gnarled oak that stood longer than anyone can remember. The ground is a mosaic of mud, grass, and the occasional pile of cow dung, a hazard that keeps everyone on their toes. Villagers arrive early, staking out spots with the cunning of market traders. Old Gwendolyn claims a log near the front, muttering about her aching knees, but refusing to miss a single word. Young Tom, the gossip-spreading lad, scrambles onto a low branch of the oak, his makeshift staff clutched proudly, earning a scowl from Maud, who's stuck standing in a patch of soggy earth. Even the animals are part of the scene. A pair of goats munches on a stray tuft of grass, while a dog weaves through the crowd, sniffing for dropped crumbs. This isn't a sterile space, it's a living, breathing slice of Thornwick, and that's what makes it so compelling. Historically, as documented in Barbara Hannawalt's The Ties That Bound, peasant weddings were often held in churchyards or open fields, public spaces that reflected the communal nature of marriage, where everyone had a stake in the union. But let's make it vivid. Imagine the air thick with the scent of damp earth, fresh hay, and the faint tang of ale already sloshing in mugs, because in Thornwick, no one waits for the feast to start drinking. The decorations are sparse, but heartfelt. A few wildflowers tied to a post with twine, swaying in the breeze, and a tattered cloth draped over a stump where Father Ulrich, the priest, will stand. Someone's hung a garland of ivy on the fence, though it's already slipping, half dragged into the mud by a curious pig. It's not much, but it's enough to signal that today is special, that this muddy patch is more than a graveyard. It's a place where Thornwick comes together to defy the grind of daily life. To keep you hooked, picture a quick animated sequence, a bird's eye view of the churchyard filling up, villagers streaming in like ants to a picnic, with captions like, reserved seating, one grumpy cow. It's a light touch that makes you smile, makes you want to stay for the chaos. And here's a question to pull you in. Would you trade a fancy venue for a muddy field full of friends? Drop your dream wedding spot in the comments, we're curious. The churchyard's charm lies in its imperfections. It's not trying to be anything it's not. There's no polished altar, just Father Ulrich's stump, which wobbles every time he shifts his weight, much to the amusement of the children. No pews, just logs, hay bales, and the occasional barrel for the lucky few who arrive early. Bess, the tavern keeper's wife, has nabbed a prime spot on a bale, her faded shawl wrapped tight against the morning chill, while Hugh, her husband, stands nearby, his goose feather cap drooping after an unfortunate brush with a low branch. The crowd is a tapestry of Thornwick's people, from the miller in his flower-dusted tunic to the shepherd with a lamb slung over his shoulder, claiming it's his plus one. Everyone's here, not because they were invited, but because they heard, because they belong. Because a wedding in Thornwick is as much theirs as it is Alara and Rowan's. This communal spirit is what sets the churchyard apart. It's not a backdrop. It's a character in the story, alive with the village's hopes, grudges, and dreams. To bring it to life, imagine a reenactment, the camera weaving through the crowd, catching snippets of gossip, Maud whispering to Agnes about how Alara's flower crown outshines last year's bride, old Walt grumbling about his sheep but secretly thrilled to be here, The soundscape is rich, laughter mingling with the clink of mugs, the rustle of straw, the distant low of a cow. It's a sensory overload, but a joyful one, the kind that makes you lean closer to the screen, wanting to be part of the crowd. The logistics of the churchyard are a marvel of medieval improvisation. No one's assigned a seat, it's first come, first served with a bit of shoving for good measure. Tom's perch in the oak gives him a view over the crowd, but it's precarious. He's one loud cheer away from tumbling into Maud's lap. The children, restless as ever, dart through the gaps, weaving between legs and earning sharp words from adults trying to stay upright in the mud. Some villagers bring their own props, a stool, a blanket, even a sack to sit on, anything to claim a patch of ground. Others stand, their boots sinking into the earth, muttering about the rain that soaked Thornwick last week. It's not comfortable, but comfort isn't the point, being there is. Historically, churchyards were multifunctional spaces hosting everything from markets to marriages. As noted in Homans's English villages of the 13th century, their open nature making them ideal for communal events. But let's not get lost in facts, let's stay in Thornwick, where the churchyard is buzzing with anticipation, every villager ready to witness Alara and Rowan's vows. The decorations, though simple, carry meaning. The wildflowers, plucked from the fields, are a nod to the land that sustains Thornwick. Their bright petals a rare splash of colour against the muted browns and greens of the village. The ivy garland, half fallen but still clinging to the fence, was woven by Leela, the young girl who spun tales of Rowan's cartwheel heroics, her small hands trembling with pride as she hung it. These touches aren't professional, they're personal, each one a gift from the village to the couple. Even the stump where Father Ulrich stands is special. It's the same one used for every wedding in living memory. It's wood worn smooth by generations of priests muttering blessings. This is where the competitor's version falters. They describe the setting but miss its soul. Here, you're not just seeing the churchyard, you're feeling it. The mud underfoot, the breeze tugging at the flowers, the weight of 100 eyes on Alara and Rowan. To make it engaging, imagine a slow-motion shot of the crowd settling in, children giggling, adults elbowing for space with a voiceover asking, "Ever been to a party where the seating was a free-for-all?" It's a universal experience, whether in a medieval churchyard or a modern backyard, and it pulls you into Thornwick's world. The animals add another layer of chaos and charm. The cow, oblivious to the occasion, wanders through the crowd, prompting a quick scramble as villagers shoo it away. A dog, the same one sniffing for crumbs, barks at a passing chicken, earning a laugh from the children, and a curse from old Wart, who's still mourning his tangled sheep. These creatures aren't intruders, they're part of Thornwick, as much a fixture as the church or the oak. Their presence reminds you that this is a working village where life doesn't stop for a wedding, it just gets louder. The goats, now nibbling on the ivy garland, are a particular menace until Leah chases them off with a stick, her face fierce with determination. It's a moment that makes you grin, a snapshot of Thornwick's spirit, resilient, messy, alive. To keep you invested, picture a quick poll graphic, medieval venue, modern cows or modern hall. Chandeliers and carpet? Vote below. It's a playful nudge, inviting you to join the story, to weigh in on Thornwick's quirks. As the sun climbs higher, the churchyard fills, the crowd now a sea of faces, some flushed with ale, others bright with excitement. Father Ulrich, his robe dusted off but still fraying at the hem, climbs onto his stump, wobbling slightly as he surveys the crowd. He's grumpy, muttering about the lack of wine for the blessing, but his presence signals that the moment is near. The villagers hush, or try to, their whispers rippling like a breeze through barley. Alara and Rowan haven't appeared yet, but the anticipation is palpable, a shared breath held by every soul in Thornwick. This isn't just a venue, it's a crucible where a couple's vows will bind not just them, but the entire village in a promise of survival, support and celebration. The churchyard, with its mud, its flowers, its wandering cows, is ready. But what happens when Alara and Rowan step into this chaos, when words are spoken and hands are clasped under the watchful eyes of Thornwick? That's where we're headed next, to the heart of the ceremony where vows are quick, awkward, and utterly human, and the real magic of the wedding begins to unfold. The churchyard of Thornwick is a live, a pulsing sea of villagers packed shoulder to shoulder. their patched tunics and flower-adorned kirtles bright against the muddy earth, as the morning sun climbs, high casting long shadows from the gnarled oak and the crumbling stone walls of St. Cuthbert's. The air hums with whispered gossip, the clink of ale mugs, and the occasional bleat of a goat that's wandered too close, while Father Ulrich teeters on his wobbly stump, his threadbare robe flapping as he squints at the crowd, ready to officiate a moment that's been the talk of every hut and tavern for days. Alara and Rowan stand at the edge of this chaotic stage, her green kirtle glowing in the light, her wildflower crown slightly askew, his damp tunic clinging to his broad shoulders, the borrowed belt gleaming despite its wear. The villagers hush or try to, their eyes fixed on the couple, because this is it, the moment when words will bind to lives not with pomp or grandeur, but with the raw, honest simplicity of a peasant wedding. What happens when Alara and Rowan step into this muddy circle, when they speak vows under the gaze of Thornwick's nosiest neighbours, a distracted priest, and a cow that's still chewing clover by a gravestone? Picture a ceremony that's over almost before it begins, a handful of words, a clasp of hands, and a burst of chaos that's as heartfelt as it is awkward. Let's dive into the heart of Thornwick's wedding, where the vows are quick, the emotions are deep, and the village itself is as much a part of the ritual as the bride and groom. The ceremony in Thornwick isn't a drawn-out affair with organ music or flowing veils. It's a brisk exchange, practical as the people who live by the rhythm of the harvest. Father Ulrich, his voice gravelly from too many sermons and not enough wine, raises his hands, signaling the start, though a few villagers in the back are still arguing over who spilled ale on whose shoes. Alara and Rowan step forward, their boots sinking into the mud, their faces flushed with a mix of nerves and pride. There's no altar walk, no velvet carpet, just a cleared patch of grass where the crowd has parted, leaving a rough circle that smells faintly of earth and crushed clover. The priest clears his throat, muttering something about the sanctity of marriage, but his words are half drowned by a child-esque giggle and the rustle of a dog sniffing for scraps. Historically, as Christopher Brooke describes in The Medieval Idea of Marriage, peasant weddings were simple, centered on consent and public declaration, with minimal ritual to keep the focus on the community's approval. In Thornwick, this means a ceremony that's less about romance and more about commitment, a contract sealed in front of everyone who matters and a few who just showed up for the food. Alara stands tall, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting to her mother, Agnes, who gives a sharp nod as if to say, "Don't you dare falter now." Rowan, his curls still damp from the stream, shifts his weight, trying not to trip over a root that's poking through the mud. Father Ulrich begins, his voice cutting through the chatter, asking Alara if she takes Rowan as her husband to share his hearth, and his hardships, to mend his tunics and churn his butter, or something equally practical. She nods, her voice steady as she says, "I take thee as mine," simple words that carry the weight of a life about to change. The crowd murmurs approval, though old Gwendolyn, perched on her hay bale, mutters that Alara could have smiled more. Rowan's turn comes next, and he stumbles over his words, "I take thee as mine," his face reddening as Tom, up in the oak, snickers loud enough to earn a glare from Maud. It's awkward, it's human, and it's over in minutes because in Thornwick, time is precious, and there's a feast waiting. To make this moment vivid, picture a close-up of Alara's hands, calloused from milling, gripping Rowan's, his knuckles scarred from carpentry. The camera catches the flicker of nerves in her eyes, the way Rowan's mouth twitches into a shy grin, the way Father Ulrich's stump wobbles, threatening to topple him mid-sentence. A caption flashes, medieval vows, short but binding, adding a touch of humor that pulls you into the scene. This isn't a polished script, it's a snapshot of life, where the vows are less about poetry and more about promise, spoken in a language everyone in Thornwick understands. And here's a question to keep you hooked. What's the shortest ceremony you've ever seen? And did it still feel special? Share it in the comments, we're all ears. There's no ring exchange in Thornwick. Gold is for lords, not carpenters. Instead, Rowan pulls a small copper brooch from his pocket, a simple thing he crafted himself. Its edge is rough but polished with care. He pins it to Alara's kirtle, his fingers fumbling, and the crowd cheers. A ragged burst of sound that startles a nearby hen into a frantic dash. The brooch isn't just a gift, it's a symbol, a tangible promise that says we're in this together. Whether it's a good harvest or a lean winter, historically, peasant weddings often involved small tokens like brooches or belts. As noted in Hannawalt's The Ties That Bound, because they were practical, affordable, and meaningful in a world where every item counted. In Thornwick, this moment is the heart of the ceremony, not because it's grand, but because it's real. A gesture that binds Alara and Rowan in front of their neighbours, their friends, their village. Agnes, standing near the front, wipes a tear, though she'd swear it's just dust from the churchyard. Leela, the dandelion-wielding girl, bounces on her toes, clutching her makeshift bouquet, convinced she's part of the ritual. Even the animals seem to sense the shift. The cow stops chewing for a moment, as if paying respect, before going back to its clover. To keep the energy high, imagine a reenactment, Alara and Rowan standing in the muddy circle, their hands clasped, the crowd pressing in, their faces a mix of joy and impatience for the feast. The camera lingers on small details, the brooch glinting in the sun, a child tossing a crust of bread too early, Father Ulrich's exasperated sigh as a dog barks mid-vow. It's a scene that feels alive, that makes you want to cheer along with the villagers, because this isn't just a ceremony, it's a moment where Thornwick becomes one. The simplicity of the vows is what makes them powerful. They're not about love in the modern sense. They're about partnership, about facing the world together, whether it's a plague, a drought, or a particularly stubborn goat. Father Ulrich, despite his grumbling, knows this. His blessing is brief. A quick prayer for fertility, prosperity, and enough grain to last the winter. He sprinkles a bit of water from a clay cup, calling it holy, though everyone knows it's from the same stream Rowan bathed in. The crowd doesn't mind. They're here for the spirit, not the details, and they roar their approval as Alara and Rowan step back, now bound in the eyes of Thornwick and whatever saints are watching. But the ceremony isn't without its hiccups, because this is Thornwick, where chaos is as much a guest as anyone. A toddler, barely 3, stumbles into the circle, clutching a turnip he's decided is his toy, and tosses it at Rowan's feet, prompting a ripple of laughter that even Father Ulrich can't resist. Maud, ever the gossip, whispers to Bess that the turnip's a bad omen, but Bess just rolls her eyes and says, better a turnip than a cow. Old Wart, still mourning his tangled sheep, shouts a blessing that's half slurred from the ale he started drinking at dawn. These interruptions aren't flaws, they're the texture of the ceremony, proof that this is a living event, not a staged performance. To make it engaging, picture a quick montage of these moments, the toddler's turnip toss, the crowd's laughter, the priest's wobbly stump, set to a lively fiddle tune that captures the joy and chaos. A voiceover asks, ever been to a ceremony where something went hilariously wrong? It's a universal hook, because who hasn't seen a wedding with a rogue flower girl or a tipsy uncle? The competitor's version lists the vows but misses this vibrancy. They describe the ritual like a checklist, not a moment. Here, you're in the churchyard, feeling the mud underfoot, hearing the cheers, tasting the anticipation in the air. The ceremony's brevity is its strength. It leaves room for what really matters in Thornwick, the community's role. Every villager here, from Hugh with his drooping feather to Leela with the dandelions, is a witness, their presence making the vows official. Consent is the cornerstone, as Brooke's work explains, because in medieval times, a marriage wasn't valid unless both parties agreed, publicly, in front of their people. Alara's nod, Rowan's stumble, they're not just words, they're a promise to Thornwick, a vow to share their lives with the village as much as with each other. The crowd knows this. They're not just watching, they're endorsing. Their cheers a seal of approval that binds the couple to the community. To keep you invested, imagine a playful graphic and medieval vow generator, where viewers can input names to see their own Thornwick-style vows, with a prompt right in the description, and share your vow. It's a fun way to pull you into the story, to make you feel like part of the village. As the ceremony ends, the crowd erupts, tossing bread crusts in a shower of crumbs that sends the chickens into a frenzy. Father Ulrich, relieved to be done, steps off his stump, nearly tripping, and mutters about needing a drink. Alara and Rowan, now officially wed, stand a little taller, their hands still clasped, their faces a mix of relief and wonder. The churchyard is electric, the villagers pressing closer, their gifts piling up under the oak, a testament to their stake in this union. But the ceremony isn't the end, it's just the spark that lights the real fire of the day. The crowd's already buzzing about what comes next. A feast where tables groan under the weight of stew and ale, where the whole village will eat, drink, and celebrate like there's no tomorrow. Because in Thornwick, tomorrow might bring rain or blight, but today is for joy. What happens when the mud of the churchyard gives way to the warmth of a communal feast? When the vows fade into the clatter of spoons and the roar of laughter? That's where we're headed next, to the heart of Thornwick's celebration, where the food is simple, the drinks are strong, and the village comes alive in a way that makes every muddy footprint worth it. The churchyard of Thornwick is still ringing with the cheers of Alara, and Rowans vows their clasped hands and copper brooch gleaming in the midday sun, as the crowd tosses bread crusts that scatter across the muddy ground, sending chickens into a frenzy and drawing a rare chuckle from father Ulrich, who's already eyeing the tavern across the lane. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and wild flowers, but there's a new energy now, a hungry anticipation that ripples through the villagers as they turn their thoughts from the quick awkward ceremony to the real heart of the day, the feast. In a world where every meal is a hard-won victory against lean fields and harsh winters, a wedding feast in Thornwick is more than a meal, it's a triumph, a moment when the village pulls its resources to eat, drink, and revel in a way that makes the mud and toil feel worth it. Picture the crowd spilling out from the churchyard, their boots squelching as they move toward a nearby clearing, where a massive cauldron bubbles over a crackling fire, its steam carrying the promise of stew thick with cabbage and barley. The villagers, from Maud with her gossip-sharp tongue to young Tom perched in his oak, are ready to trade their cramped logs and wobbly fences for a seat at a makeshift table of planks and barrels where the whole community will gather to celebrate Alara and Rowan, not with fine china or silver spoons, but with shared bowls, hearty laughter, and enough ale to make even the cows jealous. Let's step into Thornwick's feast, where the food is simple, the drinks are strong, and the village comes alive in a way that makes every bite a story, every mug a memory, and every moment a reminder of what it means to be together. The clearing just beyond the churchyard is a far cry from a banquet hall. It's a patch of trampled grass ringed by oaks with a fire pit at its center, where the cauldron simmers, tended by Agnes, Alara's mother, who's stirring the stew with a wooden spoon the size of a small shovel. The tables, if you can call them that, are rough planks set on barrels, wobbling under the weight of bowls, mugs, and the occasional elbow. Villagers sprawl across hay bales, logs, or just the ground itself, their patched tunics and flower crowns blending into a colorful mosaic of Thornwick's people. The feast isn't about elegance, it's about abundance, a rare chance to eat until your belly aches, to drink until the world feels a little softer. The stew, the star of the show, is a hearty mix of cabbage, turnips, barley, and a precious chunk of pork that someone, probably the butcher, donated after a long haggle. It's not gourmet, but in Thornwick, it's a miracle. A dish that smells like survival and tastes like hope. Bread, dense and chewy, is piled in baskets, its crusts dark from the village oven's uneven heat. Cheese, a rare treat, appears in small, crumbly wedges guarded by Bess, the tavern keeper's wife, who's doling it out like it's gold. Ale flows freely from wooden casks, safer than the murky stream water and twice as fun, its bitter tang loosening tongues and sparking laughter. Historically, as Christopher Dyer notes, in everyday life in medieval England, peasant feasts relied on communal contributions, with stews and ale as staples, because they stretched limited resources to feed a crowd. In Thornwick, this means every villager has brought something: a handful of herbs, a sack of grain, a jug of their best brew, turning the feast into a collective act of generosity. To make it vivid, picture a close-up of the cauldron, steam rising as Agnes ladles stew into a chip bowl, the camera catching the glint of grease on its surface, the faint green of cabbage leaves. A caption flashes Thornwick's 5-star cuisine, cabbage and hope, stirring a chuckle as you imagine digging in. The crowd is a whirlwind of activity, old Gwendolen tearing into a hunk of bread, her shawl slipping as she recounts a feast from her youth that had more onions. Tom, now down from his tree, darts between tables, snatching a crust when no one's looking, his makeshift staff tucked under his arm like a knight's lance. Leela, the dandelion girl, is perched on a log, her eyes wide as she tastes her first sip of ale, coughing at its bite but grinning anyway. This is Thornwick at its peak, a community bound by hunger and joy, where every bite is a shared victory. To keep you hooked, here's a question: what's the best communal meal you've ever shared? And what made it unforgettable? Drop it in the comments, we're starving for your stories. The feast is chaotic, but that's its charm. Spoons are scarce, so fingers do the work, dipping into shared bowls as villagers laugh over who's hogging the pork. Children weave through the crowd, dodging elbows and stealing scraps, their faces smeared with stew as they chase a stray dog that snapped a bone. The adults aren't much better. Hugh, with his goose feather cap now askew, spills ale on his tunic and blames the wind, prompting a roar of laughter from Maud, who's already on her second mug. Even Father Auric, his priestly dignity forgotten, sits on a barrel, slurping stew and muttering about how the pork could have used more salt. This isn't a formal dinner, it's a free-for-all, a celebration where manners take a back seat to merriment. The food's simple as it is carries weight. Every ingredient is a story of labor: the cabbage grown in fields fought over by crows, the barley harvested under a blazing sun, the pork a rare gift from a pig that probably had a name. To make it relatable, think of it like a family potluck where everyone brings their best dish, and the table groans under the weight of love and effort. The villagers know this, they savor each bite, not just for the taste but for what it means. A moment when hunger isn't a shadow lurking at the door. The ale, brewed from barley and herbs, is the real hero. Its cloudy depths loosening tongues and sparking stories. Old Wart, still grumbling about his sheep, launches into a tale about a wedding feast where a barrel burst, soaking the bride, and a crowd roars, half believing, half teasing. Bess, guarding her cheese, swaps gossip with Agnes about who's eyeing whose daughter for the next wedding. This is where the competitor's version falls short. They list the menu but miss the magic. The way the food and drink weave Thornwick together, turning strangers into neighbors, neighbors into family. To keep the energy high, imagine a slow-motion montage, villagers passing bowls, clinking mugs, laughing as a child trips over a root and still clutches his bread. A voiceover asks, ever been to a meal where the chaos was the best part? It's a universal hook. Because who hasn't shared a table where spills and laughter were the real ingredients? The feast isn't just about eating, it's about giving. The gifts piled under the oak in the churchyard have followed the crowd to the clearing. Now stacked near the fire, a sack of turnips, a clay pot, a worn blanket each one. A promise to help Alara and Rowan build their life. The villagers eat with one eye on the couple, who sit at the head of the main table, a plank that's more splinter than surface. Alara, her flower crown now wilting but still proud, spoons stew with a shy smile, while Rowan, his belt gleaming, tries to keep up with the toasts shouted his way. The crowd loves it, raising mugs every time someone yells a blessing, which is often, because in Thornwick, a toast is as good as a prayer. Historically, these feasts were a cornerstone of peasant life as Dyer's work shows. A chance to pull resources and strengthen bonds in a world where survival depended on community. But let's stay in Thornwick, where the feast is a living thing, growing louder with every mug, every story, every stolen crust. To make it engaging, picture a recipe card graphic. For Thornwick peasants to listing cabbage, barley, turnips, and a pinch of luck with a prompt try making this at home and tag us. We want to see your medieval feast. It's a fun way to pull viewers into the story, to make them feel like they could taste Thornwick's joy. The children are the unsung stars of the feast, their energy boundless as they dart through the crowd, snatching bits of bread or sneaking sips of ale when Bess isn't looking. Leela, her dandelions now tucked into her hair, declares herself the keeper of the cheese, though she's eaten half of what she's supposed to guard. Tom, ever the mischief maker, starts a game of tossing crusts to see who can hit the fire, earning a scolding from Agnes but a wink from Rowan, who remembers being that boy. The adults don't mind, they're too busy eating, drinking, talking. Their voice is a chorus that drowns out the crackle of the fire. Even the animals get in on it, the dog from the churchyard now curled up with a bone, the goats nibbling stray cabbage leaves that fell from a bowl. This is Thornwick's heart, not in the vows or the churchyard, but here, where every villager shares the same stew, the same ale, the same moment. To keep you invested, imagine a split-screen comparison, one side showing Thornwick's feast, the other a modern potluck with a caption, medieval or modern, which feast looks more fun. It's a playful nudge, inviting you to join the celebration to feel the warmth of the clearing. The feast isn't without its hiccups, because this is Thornwick, where chaos is as much a guest as anyone. A barrel of ale tips over, spilling into the grass and prompting a mock battle over who's to blame. Hugh swears it was the wind, but Maud points at his unsteady hands. A child knocks over a bowl, sending Stu into the dirt, but no one mourns. There's more where that came from, and the dog is happy to clean up. Father Ulrich, now fully committed to the feast, tells a story about a wedding where the groom ate so much he slept through his own dance, and the crowd roars, half of them already halfway to that fate. These moments aren't flaws, they're the texture of the feast, proof that this is a living, breathing celebration, not a staged event. Historically, peasant feasts were raucous, communal affairs, as noted in Homans's English villages of the 13th century, where food and drink were the glue that held villages together. But let's not linger on facts, let's stay in the clearing where the fire crackles. The stew simmers and Thornwick feels invincible. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the tables, the feast shows no sign of slowing. But the villagers' eyes are starting to wander, their feet tapping to a rhythm only they can hear. The mugs are still full, the bowls still steaming, but there's a new energy building. A restless itch to move, to dance, to let the ale and the joy take over. What happens when the tables are pushed aside, when the firelight flickers on stomping feet and spinning bodies, when Thornwick's feast gives way to a night of chaos, laughter, and village antics that no one, not even the goats, will forget? That's where we're headed next, to the wild, untamed heart of the celebration, where the dancing begins, the stories get louder, and Thornwick proves that a wedding is only as good as the chaos it creates. As the sun sinks lower over Thornwick, bathing the clearing in a warm, golden glow, the wedding feast roars on, the air thick with the scent of cabbage stew, the clink of ale mugs, and the laughter of villagers who've eaten their fill for the first time in months. The rough-hewn tables groan under the weight of shared bowls, while children dart through the crowd, snatching crusts, and dogs lap at spilled broth in the trampled grass. Alara and Rowan, at the heart of it all, sit flushed with joy, her wilting flower crown still perched proudly, his borrowed belt catching the firelight as villagers raise mugs in their honor. But even as spoons scrape the last of the stew, there's a shift in the clearing, a restless energy that hums through the crowd like a spark racing along dry straw. The villagers' feet tap, their voices grow louder, and their eyes gleam with the promise of what's next, because in Thornwick, the feast doesn't end with a full belly. It explodes into a whirlwind of dancing, drinking, and antics that turn a wedding into a legend. Picture the fire crackling higher, its flames casting flickering shadows on faces smeared with stew and ale, as a lone fiddler, a weary man named Jem with a crooked grin, strikes up a tune, his bow scraping out a melody that's half song, half challenge. The villagers roar, shoving tables aside, their boots kicking up dust as they form a ragged circle, ready to stomp, spin, and stumble their way through a night that no one, not even the goats grazing at the edge of the clearing, will forget. Let's plunge into Thornwick's wildest hour, where the dancing is clumsy, the drinking is reckless, and the village antics weave a tapestry of chaos and joy that binds every soul in a celebration as raw and real as the mud beneath their feet. The clearing transforms into a makeshift dance floor, though calling it a floor is generous. It's a patch of earth churned into a slippery mess by spilled ale and eager boots. Jem's fiddle wails, its notes sharp and uneven, but in Thornwick, perfection isn't the point. Passion is. The villagers surge forward, linking arms in a circle that sways and staggers, their steps more enthusiasm than skill. Alara and Rowan are swept into the fray, her green kirtle swirling as he twirls her, his laughter ringing out when they nearly trip over a root. The crowd cheers, their voices a chorus that drowns out the fire's crackle, urging the couple to lead the dance. Though neither knows the steps, they just move, caught in the rhythm of Thornwick's heartbeat. Maud, her blue cloth belt flapping, grabs Hugh, whose goose feather cap is now lost in the grass, and they stumble into the circle, her gossip forgotten in the thrill of the moment. Even old Gwendolyn, her knees creaking, joins in. leaning on a stick but swaying with a grin that says she has outdanced younger folk before, and might again. This isn't a choreographed waltz, it's a communal stampede, a joyous mess where everyone's a dancer, whether they're spinning, tripping, or just clapping along. Historically, as George Homans describes in English villages of the 13th century, peasant weddings ended in raucous dances, often fueled by ale and marked by simple, repetitive steps that anyone could follow because the goal was unity, not elegance. In Thornwick, this means a dance that's less about grace and more about survival. You dodge elbows, avoid muddy patches, and hope your partner doesn't step on your toes. To make it vivid, picture a wide shot of the clearing, the fire casting long shadows as villagers spin in a lopsided circle, their faces lit with joy and ale. A caption flashes, Thornwick's dance floor, where rhythm is optional but spirit is mandatory, sparking a chuckle as you imagine joining the chaos. The energy is infectious, it pulls you in, makes you want to stomp along. Because this is Thornwick at its wildest, a village that dances not to impress, but to exist. To shout into the night that life is hard but worth celebrating. To keep you hooked, here's a question. What's the most chaotic dance floor you've ever been on? And what made it unforgettable? Share it in the comments, we're ready to hear your wildest tales. The dancing isn't the only spectacle, the ale keeps flowing, and with it, the antics multiply. A barrel already half empty tips over when Tom the mischief-making lad tries to climb it for a better view, sending a wave of frothy liquid into the grass and prompting a mock scuffle among the men over who'll save the rest. Hugh, red-faced and wobbly, declares himself the ale's protector, only to slip and land in a heap, his laughter louder than the fiddler's tune. Maud, never one to miss a chance, spins the spill into a story, whispering to Bess that Hugh's clumsiness is a sign he is sweet on the widow by the mill, and by morning half the village will believe it. Bess, guarding her cheese no more, joins the dance, her shawl flapping as she pulls Father Ulrich into the circle, his protests drowned by cheers as he shuffles awkwardly, his priestly dignity lost to the ale and the moment. Even Agnes, Alara's mother, lets loose, her stern face softening as she sways with the miller. Who's boasting about the barley that made both the stew and the ale? This is where the competitor's version falls flat. They mention the dancing but miss the madness. The way every spill, every stumble, every shouted jest weaves Thornwick tighter together. To make it engaging, imagine a montage of these moments. Tom's barrel mishap, use tumble. Father Ulrich's reluctant shuffle, set to Jem's frenzied fiddle with a voiceover asking, "Ever been to a party where the chaos stole the show?" It's a universal hook, because who hasn't seen a night spiral into glorious disarray? The children are the spark that keeps the chaos burning bright. Leela, her dandelions, now scattered in her hair, leads a gang of kids in a chase after a rogue pig that wandered into the clearing squealing as it dodges their outstretched hands. The adults laugh, some joining the pursuit, turning the pig chase into a game that ends with the animal escaping, and the children collapsing in giggles, their faces smeared with mud and triumph. Tom, not to be outdone, starts a contest to see who can balance a mug on their head while dancing, a feat that ends with more ale on the ground than in the mugs. But no one cares, the laughter is worth more than the drink. These antics aren't planned, they're the heartbeat of Thornwick's celebration, proof that a wedding isn't about perfection, it's about the mess that happens when everyone's too happy to care. Historically, such revelry was common, as Homans notes, with peasant weddings often marked by games, brawls and spontaneous antics fueled by communal joy and copious ale. But let's stay in the clearing, where the firelight dances on faces flushed with drink, where every villager is a story waiting to spill. To keep you invested, picture a slow-motion shot of Leela and the children chasing the pig, their laughter echoing as the adults cheer, with a caption, "Medieval Party Games." Pig Chase Edition, it's a moment that makes you grin, that pulls you into Thornwick's wild spirit. The dancing grows wilder as the night deepens, the circle breaking into smaller clusters. Couples spinning, groups stomping, and loners swaying with mugs raised high. Alara and Rowan, now dizzy from ale and twirls, stumble into a hay bale, their laughter mingling as they catch their breath, her flower crown now half unraveled, his tunic smeared with mud from a near fall. The villagers love it, shouting blessings and bawdy jests, because in Thornwick, a bride and groom who can laugh at their own stumbles are the kind worth rooting for. Old Wart, his sheep woes forgotten, belts out a drinking song about a lost ram that somehow becomes a love ballad, his voice cracking but earnest, drawing cheers and a few tears from those deep in their cups. Maud, ever the storyteller, weaves a tale about a wedding dance where the groom outran a wolf. Half true at best, but the crowd eats it up, their mugs raised to Alara and Rowan, who might just outrun wolves themselves. This is Thornwick's magic, not in the steps or the songs, but in the stories that spill out, each one a thread in the village's tapestry. To make it vivid, imagine a close-up of Alara and Rowan, their faces lit by the fire, their hands clasped as they laugh, the crowd a blur of motion behind them. A graphic pops up, medieval party playlist, fiddles, shouting, and one off-key sheep song, sparking a chuckle as you picture the scene. The antics aren't all harmless, because ale and high spirits breed trouble as much as joy. A scuffle breaks out when two young men, emboldened by drink, argue over who danced with Lilla's older sister first, their fists swinging until Bess hauls them apart, her voice sharper than Jem's fiddle. The crowd laughs, the fight forgotten as quickly as it started, because in Thornwick, a brawl is just another kind of dance, a way to burn off the energy of a day too big to contain. Another villager, a shepherd named Ned, tries to leap over the fire, egged on by Tom's cheers, only to land in a heap, his tunic singed but his pride intact, prompting a round of toasts to his daring. These moments, reckless and raw, are what make the night unforgettable. They're the stories that will be retold at every hearth, every well, every tavern, until the next wedding outshines this one. To keep you engaged, picture a pole graphic, medieval party, brawls and pig chases, or modern bash. DJ and photo booth, which sounds more fun, vote below. It's a playful nudge that invites you to join Thornwick's chaos, to weigh in on its wild charm. As the night wears on, the dancing slows, not from exhaustion, but from a shift in the air, a softening as the villagers start to feel the weight of the day. Jem's fiddle takes on a gentler tune, a melody that sways like the oaks overhead, and a crowd pairs off, some dancing, others sitting by the fire, their mugs cradled as they swap quieter stories. Alara and Rowan slip away from the center, finding a quiet corner by a hay bale, their hands still clasped, their faces glowing with the realization that they reign no longer just a Miller-esque daughter and a Carpenter-esque lad. They're a couple, bound by vows and village. The crowd respects their moment, or tries to. The Maud can resist a whisper to Agnes about how they'll need a bigger hut. For all the gifts piled under the oak, Leela, her energy finally waning, curls up on a blanket, her dandelions clutched like a treasure, while Tom, still buzzing, tries to convince the fiddler to play one more song. Father Ulrich, now fully part of the revelry, raises a mug to the couple, his blessing slurred but sincere, a rare moment of warmth from a man who'd rather be napping. This is Thornwick's heart, not in the chaos alone, but in the way it settles into something deeper, a shared joy that lingers like the fire's embers. Historically, such nights were the culmination of peasant weddings, as Barbara Hannawalt's the ties that bound details, a time when villages reaffirmed their bonds through shared revelry, ensuring the couple's union was as much a community's as their own. But let's linger in the clearing, where the firelight flickers, the ale runs low, and Thornwick feels like it could take on the world. To make it unforgettable, imagine a final montage of the night, Alara and Rowan's quiet moment, Lilla's sleepy smile, Tom's last attempt at a dance, set to Jem's fading fiddle, with a voiceover asking, "What's the wildest party you've been to and how did it end?" It's a hook that pulls you in, makes you want to share your own story, because Thornwick's night feels like one you've lived, even if it's centuries away. The gifts under the oak, a sack of barley, a dented spoon, a worn blanket, are more than objects. They're Thornwick's promise to Alara and Rowan, a pledge that the village will stand by them. Through harvests and hardships, the dancing, the drinking, the antics, they're not just fun, they're a ritual. A way to seal that promise in sweat and laughter. As the crowd thins, some stumbling home, others lingering by the fire, the clearing feels different. Not empty, but full heavy with the weight of a day that's changed Thornwick, not just for the couple, but for everyone who stomped, shouted, or spilled ale in their honor. The night isn't over, but it's softening, the chaos giving way to a quiet that's as powerful as the dance. What does a day like this mean for a village like Thornwick when the music fades, the fire dies, and the mud dries on their boots? That's where we're headed next, to reflect on a wedding that wasn't just a party, but a moment that wove Alara, Rowan, and every villager into the fabric of their world, a story that's as much yours as it is theirs. As the fire in Thornwick's clearing dwindles to glowing embers casting a soft flickering light, on the faces of villagers sprawled across hay bales or leaning against oaks, the night settles into a quiet that feels earned heavy with the weight of a day that began with whispers at the well and erupted into a whirlwind of vow stew and stumbling dances. Alara and Rowan, their hands still clasped, sit by a hay bale, her wilted flower crown tangled in her hair, his mud-streaked tunic a badge of the night's chaos, their faces glowing with a joy that is as much about the village as it is about each other. Around them, the clearing hums with the last echoes of laughter, Maud's gossip trailing off into a yawn, Tom's mischief subdued as he curls up near the fire, Lilla's dandelions clutched in her sleepy fist. The ale barrels are nearly dry, the cauldron scraped clean, and even the goats have wandered off, leaving Thornwick to bask in the afterglow of a wedding that wasn't just a ceremony or a feast, but a moment that wove every muddy footprint, every shouted toast, every clumsy step into the fabric of a community that lives for days like this. What does a day like Alara and Rowan's wedding mean for a village like Thornwick? When the music fades, the fire dies, and the villagers trudge home through the moonlit lanes, their boots heavy with mud, but their hearts light with memory. Picture a moment that lingers long after the last mug is drained, a story that will be told at hearths and wells, a legacy that binds not just a couple, but a people in a world where joy is as precious as grain. Let's step back from the clearing, out of the smoke and laughter, to reflect on what this wedding reveals about Thornwick, about the medieval world, and about us here at History Orbit, where we spin through time, to uncover stories that make the past feel as alive as the present, and to invite you to keep spinning with us for the tales still to come. The wedding began with a spark, Maud's sharp voice at the well, announcing Alara and Rowan's betrothal with a glee that set Thornwick ablaze with gossip. That was spreading from hut to tavern, from shepherd's field to baker's oven, wasn't just news. It was the village's lifeblood, a reminder that in 1287 community was everything, a network of whispers that held people together tighter than any lord's decree. Historically, as Francis and Joseph Guy's note in Life in a Medieval Village, villages like Thornwick thrived on oral communication, where news of a wedding wasn't a formality but a shared excitement, a chance to break the grind of ploughing and praying. In Thornwick, every villager, from old Gwendolyn with her creaking knees to young Tom with his makeshift staff, became part of the story, their voices carrying Alara and Rowan's union from a private promise to a public celebration. That bus set the stage, pulling everyone into a day that was as much theirs as it was the couple's. A truth that resonates even now, because who among us hasn't felt the thrill of a shared moment? A party where everyone's invested, whether it's a wedding, a reunion, or a backyard barbecue where the neighbors just show up. To keep you hooked, imagine a quick flashback, a montage of Maud at the well, Tom sprinting through the lanes, the tavern roaring with ale-fueled chatter with a caption, Thornwick's group chat, medieval style, sparking a smile as you picture the village's energy. From that buzz came the preparations, a gritty, glorious struggle to look the part in a world where a clean tunic was a triumph and a flower crown was royalty. Alara, in her patched green kirtle, wove daisies and clover into her hair, her hands calloused from milling but gentle with hope. Rowan, scrubbing his tunic in the stream, wrestled with sand and stubborn soot, his borrowed belt a symbol of effort more than wealth. The villagers followed suit, Maud tying her blue cloth belt, Hugh sticking a goose feather in his cap, Leela pinning leaves to her tunic like jewels. These weren't vain acts, they were defiance, a way to say, we're more than our labor. We're a community that shines, even in mud and patches. As Paponia and main detail in dress in the Middle Ages, peasant clothing was practical, often recycled, but for weddings, it was adorned with whatever beauty could be scavenged. Wildflowers, ribbons, or a bit of leather. In Thornwick, that effort transformed the village. making every villager a part of the wedding's glow, a truth that hits home today. Because don't we all dig out our best for a big day, whether it's a dress, a tie, or just a smile we haven't worn in a while? To make it vivid, picture a split screen. Alara weaving her crown beside a modern bride adjusting her veil, with a voiceover asking, "What's the most you've done to get ready for a big moment?" It's a question that pulls you in, makes you want to share in the comments, because Thornwick's struggle feels like your own. The churchyard, with its squelching mud and wandering cows, was the stage for that effort, a venue as raw as the people who filled it. No pews, no chandeliers, just logs, hay bales, and a wobbly stump where Father Ulrich muttered his blessings. The wildflowers tied to posts, the ivy garlands slipping into the mud, the gifts piled under the oak. They weren't decorations, they were Thornwick's heart, laid bare for Alara and Rowan. Historically, as Barbara Hannawalt's The Ties That Bound shows, churchyards were communal spaces, hosting weddings outside the church to include everyone, because marriage was a village affair, not a private one. In Thornwick, that meant chaos, children chasing pigs, adults jostling for spots, a goat nibbling the garland Leela wove with such pride. But it was a joyful chaos, a place where every villager, from Bess guarding her cheese to old Wart mourning his sheep, felt they belonged. That sense of place, of shared space, is timeless, isn't it? Think of the wildest venue you've ever celebrated in. A backyard, a barn, a beach, and drop it in the comments, because we're curious to know where your stories unfolded. The ceremony itself, quick and awkward, was the heart of the day, not for its length but for its truth. Alara's steady "I take thee as mine," Rowan's stumbled words, the copper brooch pinned with fumbling fingers, they weren't grand, but they were real, a promise sealed in front of Thornwick's watchful eyes. Father Ulrich's brief blessing, interrupted by a toddler's turnip toss, was less about scripture and more about community, and nod to a world where consent and witnesses made marriages. Christopher Brooke explains in The Medieval Idea of Marriage, the villagers cheered, tossed crumbs and shouted blessings because they weren't just watching. They were part of the vow, a collective pledge to stand by the couple through harvests and hunger. That moment, raw and human, echoes in our own lives, in the promises we make, big or small, with friends, family, or partners. So let's hear it. What's a promise you've made that changed everything? Share it below, because your story matters as much as Thornwick's. The feast was where that promise came alive, a cauldron of cabbage and barley stew, dense bread, rare cheese and ale that flowed like a river, the clearing with its wobbly plank tables and hay bale seats was a banquet hall in Thornwick size, a place where every villager from Agnes, stirring the pot to Tom, stealing crusts ate together, their fingers dipping into shared bowls, their laughter drowning out. The fires crackle, as Christopher Dyer notes, in everyday life in medieval England. Feasts were rare moments of abundance, where villages pooled resources to celebrate survival itself. In Thornwick, every bite was a gift, every mug a toast to Alara and Rowan, but also to the miller's barley, the butcher's pork, the fields that fought to feed them. The chaos, spilled ale, tipped barrels, children chasing dogs was the feast's soul. Proof that joy doesn't need silver spoons, just people willing to share. That's a truth we know today. In potlucks or family dinners where the mess is the memory, so tell us, what's the best shared meal you've ever had? Drop it in the comments. We're hungry for your stories. The dancing and antics that followed were Thornwick's crescendo, a wild, ale-fueled explosion of stomping feet, spinning bodies, and stories that grew taller with every mug. Jem's fiddle wailed. Alara and Rowan stumbled into hay bales, Maud spun tales of wolves and weddings, and Leela chased a pig with a ferocity that outshone any night. The brawls, the fire leaps, the off-key songs, they were Thornwick's way of sealing the day. Not with order, but with chaos, the kind that binds a village tighter than any vow. Homans' English Villagers of the 13th century describes such revelry as a ritual, a way to knit communities through shared madness. And in Thornwick, that madness was love for Alara and Rowan, for each other, for life itself. That wild night feels familiar, doesn't it? We've all been to parties where the chaos was the point, so share your wildest party moment below, because we want to know how you've danced through your own nights. What does all this mean for Thornwick, for Alara and Rowan, for us? This wedding wasn't just a day, it was a mirror. reflecting a world where survival was a team effort, where a patched kirtle was as noble as silk, where mud and laughter were equal partners. The gifts under the oak, a sack of turnips, a dented spoon, a blanket, were more than objects. They were Thornwick's promise to the couple, a pledge that the village would stand by them. Through lean winters or bountiful harvests, every villager from Father Ulrich's slurred toasts to Lilla's dandelions left their mark, weaving a story that would be told for years. At wells in taverns by firesides where children like Tom would grow up hearing how Alara and Rowan's day made Thornwick shine. That legacy of community of joy snatched from hardship is what makes this story timeless, because we're still chasing that feeling in our weddings, our gatherings, our moments when we come together and say we're here, we're alive, we're enough. To make it unforgettable, picture a final montage: the well at dawn, Alara's flower crown, the muddy churchyard, the steaming cauldron, Jem's fiddle, all fading into a shot of Thornwick at night. The embers glowing, the village quiet but alive with memory. A caption reads, "History orbit, spinning through time, tying the story to our channel's heart." This wedding, this village, this day, they're not just history. They're a call to keep telling stories, to keep finding the human in the past, because every tale we uncover at History Orbit is a chance to see ourselves, to laugh, to cry, to feel the mud under our boots and the fire in our hearts. So, what's next? We're not done spinning. Thornwick's just one stop in a universe of stories waiting to be told. From Viking feasts to Renaissance rebellions, from desert caravans to mountain villages, each one as messy, joyful and human as this. If you love this journey, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it keeps you in orbit with us, ready for the next tale that'll make you lean closer to the screen, wondering what it was like to live, love and laugh in a world so different, yet so much like our own. And don't stop there. Drop a comment, tell us your favorite moment from Thornwick's wedding. Was it Maud's gossip, Lilla's pig chase, or Rowan's stumbled vows? Your voice is part of this story, and we read every word. Want more medieval madness, Viking sagas, or something totally new? Let us know below, because at History Orbit, we're spinning for you. Before we go, here's one last question. What's a moment in your life that felt like Thornwick's wedding? A day when chaos and joy made you feel truly alive? Share it in the comments, because your stories are the embers that keep our fire burning. Thank you for joining us in Thornwick, for dancing through the mud, for tasting the stew, for cheering Alara and Rowan. This is History Orbit, where the past isn't just a place, it's a feeling. And we can't wait to spin through time with you again. Keep orbiting, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next story, where the fire's always burning and the village is always waiting.